In the heart of the vast Drakkar dominion, Princess General Savita Vakrish stood as living testament to military perfection. The scar above her left eye told a silent story, each millimeter a testament to conquered moons, crushed rebellions, and flawless victories. When she gazed upon it in the polished chrome of her chambers, she felt not pride, but the crushing weight of perfection. Her ceremonial armor wasn't protection. It was a museum of conquest. Each plate etched with the names of campaigns she had dominated. The weight of it pressed against her soul as much as her body, a constant reminder of the battles won and the lives taken. The victory feasts had long since lost their flavor. The triumphant marches through conquered territories felt like walking through a graveyard. Of her own making, her chambers at the apex of this imperial spire offered a view of the sprawling capital that should have inspired pride. Instead, the glittering cityscape below felt like a circuit board of light and life, a million light years from her reach. The silence in her quarters was absolute, a pressurized stillness that made her blood thrum in her ears, like the distant drums of wars long concluded. She had become something fearsome yet, unfulfilled, a predator who had hunted her turret, so clean of rivals that she now starved for true. Challenged, the grand plaza of Ascension teemed with 1,000,000 citizens as Emperor Theon Vakrish proclaimed his daughter's glory. The crowd roared in rehearsed adoration while holographic banners proclaimed the trinity of Drakkar values: the Dominion's strength, the Emperor's wisdom, and the Princess General's unmatched might. But beneath her stoic exterior, Savita's contempt brewed like a storm, her patience worn thin by years of being paraded like a weapon rather than treated as a daughter. For this was the familiar dance, her father's attempt to forge yet another political alliance through marriage. Today's candidate, Duke Burrows of the Forge Worlds, a mountain of muscle whose greatest contribution to culture was inventing new ways to grunt. His armor, ostentatious with gold filigree, seemed to strain against his massive frame as he flexed for the broadcast drones swarming around him like metallic wasps as the hulking Duke blew a kiss toward her with lips comically small for his massive face. Something fundamental inside, Savita, some load-bearing strut of duty and obedience, finally snapped with catastrophic silence. The sound of her own pulse in her ears grew deafening, drowning out her father's practiced oration about lineage and duty. Laugh cut through her father's booming oration, sharp and dry as powdered bone. The sound was devoid of mirth. It was the sound of a pressure seal failing, of a cage door breaking its lock. The plaza fell deathly quiet, the silence a physical shock that pulled at the ears. Even the colossal holographic banners seemed to stutter, their animations freezing for a half-second. Savita stepped forward, each heel strike ringing against marble like a hammer blow against the silence. "Lineage," she proclaimed with magnificent dismissal. "These are concepts earned in the crucible of battle, not gifted in the perfumed air of a throne room." Her winter sky eyes swept across the endless sea of faces, daring anyone to challenge her truth. The broadcast drones swarmed her, transmitting her defiance to every screen across the Dominion as her father's face became a mask of placid fury. She let the quiet stretch, savoring the raw, beautiful, unpredictable chaos she had created. Then, with perfect timing, she delivered her killing blow. "I will wed the first being in this galaxy who can best me in single combat." It was not a genuine challenge, but a public declaration of her own impossibility, a final, magnificent refusal to be a pawn. The crowd exploded in scandalized delight at this unprecedented spectacle, the collective intake of breath sounding like a receding tide before detonating in thunderous noise. Savita had placed her father in checkmate on a board the size of the galaxy, while imperial drama unfolded in the Grand Plaza. A human named Cutter was operating on 3 hours of sleep, a dead caffeine patch, and the lingering effects of exotic Spirits shared with a three-armed freighter. Pilot from the outer rims, he'd slipped his ship, the questionable asset, into a low-traffic orbital, dock using stolen maintenance, frequencies, and pure audacity. His frame lean and wiry rather than bulky spoke of a life spent slipping through tight spaces and evading rather than confronting trouble. Tools jingled on his utility belt with each movement. A multi-tool with several non-standard attachments. A battered sidearm with a scorch mark near the emitter known to occasionally discharge in reverse. And a trio of small kinetic charges he'd affectionately called door knockers. Standard equipment for a man who viewed locked doors not as obstacles, but as personal insults. When he heard Savita's declaration, through a borrowed link, something in her magnificence and the profound boredom beneath her fury resonated with him. He recognized that look. He'd seen it in the mirror right before making exceptionally questionable life choices that inevitably proved enormously fun. A drunken bet made weeks earlier with that same three-armed pilot about proving human audacity was a tangible force echoed in his mind. Why not? He thought, a slow grin spreading across his face as he brushed ration bar crumbs from his patched-up, grease-stained flight suit. The prize, a crate of very old, very illegal Martian whiskey, suddenly seemed within reach. The Drakkar crowd parted in stunned disbelief as this diminutive creature weaved between their towering forms. Murmurs of confusion and contempt followed in his wake as the forest of towering armored redwoods stared down at the absurdly small, soft-looking creature navigating between their legs. Without breaking stride, he vaulted over the shimmering energy barrier at the edge of the stage before the heavily armed guards could even process his existence. "All right, I'll bite," he called out, his voice amplified to ridiculous volume by the plaza's acoustic field generators. "I've got a long trip back to the terminus and could honestly use the exercise. When do we start?" For the first time that day, Princess General Savita's perfect control cracked, replaced by something no one had ever seen on a Drakkar before: genuine, startled amusement. Emperor Theon found himself ensnared in a trap of his daughter's design. The duel was now sanctioned by public acclamation, broadcast on every channel, from the core worlds to the lawless outer rim. To deny it would be to admit fear, to suggest this lone, ragged human posed a credible threat to the unbroken Princess General. Looking up at the Emperor's colossal projected image, Cutter suspected the man was mentally calculating the orbital drop rate required to vaporize his head without damaging the surrounding marble. The circle of proving became their battlefield, vast arena surrounded by 10,000 roaring spectators. Cutter stretched like a bored cat, pointedly ignoring the torrent of insults raining down from the stands. "Prepare to be folded, soft thing," bellowed one particularly enthusiastic spectator. Savita entered like the warrior goddess she was gone was the ornate ceremonial armor replaced by a more functional, form-fitting combat harness of dark, non-reflective metal. In her hand, she held a plasma glaive that hummed with a low, lethal thrum that vibrated in Cutter's teeth. The crowd went berserk as she crossed 50 yards in the blink of an eye, becoming a blur of overwhelming force and devastating elegance. But Cutter didn't fight her strength with his own. It would have been suicide. Instead, he became pure reaction, a leaf in a hurricane, dodging and weaving, not to win, but to learn. He was downloading her, mapping her rhythm, her footwork, the almost imperceptible tension in her shoulders that telegraphed her intent. Right foot heavy, telegraphs lunge. Good beat rhythm on the overhead swing. Predictable. Favors left side for wide sweeps. He noted mentally. For 20 agonizing minutes, the human simply refused to die. The insults from the crowd gradually tapered off, replaced by confused murmurs. The human was not falling. The human was not even bleeding. He was still there, a frustrating, impossibly agile gnat buzzing around their glorious goddess of war. Then Cutter changed the music. He slid under a sweeping strike and popped up inside her guard where the long glaive was useless, slamming his palm into the joint of her elbow. It was a dirty street brawler's move that earned a genuine grunt of surprise. Parry, parry, thrust, on guard, he yelled, ducking a retaliatory backhand that would have sent his head spinning into the fifth row. The formal combat devolved into a brawl of headbutts, elbow strikes, and raw, unpredictable chaos. Cutter used her momentum against her in a classic judo throw that sent screaming agony through every muscle in his own leg, but broke Savita's perfect form for the first time in a decade. For the first time, their bodies collided not as weapon against shield, but as flesh against armor, the sharp scent of her personal shield filling his nostrils. Savita grinned not with cold dismissal, but with true predatory delight. The combat stimulants sang in her veins, but for the first time in years, they felt redundant. This feeling, this raw challenge, was the drug she'd been unconsciously craving. Under the twin suns, they battled to exhaustion. Cutter's body became a tapestry of bruises and burns, while Savita's flawless armor accumulated dents and scores, violet blood trickling from her split lip. The sand vitrified into glass by near misses crunched under their boots as they circled each other, running on nothing but pure, unadulterated stubbornness. In one final desperate gambit, Cutter baited her into a powerful overhead strike. As the plasma glaive descended like a miniature sun, he channeled every drop of power from his suit's capacitor directly into his staff's kinetic emitter of function. That wasn't so much designed as allowed to happen by bypassed safety regulators. Geronimo! He screamed, a nonsensical prayer to the gods of improvisation. The staff exploded with kinetic force, shattering bones in his arm, but blasting the plasma glaive a priceless Drakkar artifact forged in the heart of a neutron star from Savita's grasp. They stood 50 feet apart. He disarmed the shattered arm. She disarmed and spent. On their faces were identical bloody, triumphant grins. The judges declared the unprecedented a draw. The word rippled through the crowd, not as a cheer or boo, but as a wave of system-crashing confusion. The galactic nets exploded with the news. Before the Emperor could intervene, Savita let out a bark of genuine, unrestrained laughter that echoed through the stunned arena. She stalked across the sand, grabbed the bleeding human by his flight suit, and hauled him bodily from the arena, ignoring guards, judges, and her father's incandescent rage. Finally, she growled, her voice a low vibration meant only for him, a promise and threat combined. Someone worth my time. Emperor Theon found himself paralyzed by political calculation. The duel, now called the Draw, across all galactic nets, had become the biggest news event in a decade. Viral clips of the humans' absurd war cries and Savita's shocking, joyous laughter were already collector's items traded on every network from the core to the rim dot to execute Cutter. Now would be a public admission that this human truly was Savita's, equal undermining the very foundation of Drakkar superiority. The great houses, long chafing under his absolute rule, already smelled blood in the water. Her impulsive stunt had destabilized his power in a way no war ever could dot, so the Emperor tried subtlety instead. His right hand, Visir Maldor, a man, who looked like he was born in a three-piece suit and oozed polite menace offered Cutter an astronomically generous bribe, a brand new top-of-the-line Cormorant-class hauler with custom shields, all bounties and warrants wiped clean from every major systems database, and enough credits to make a planetary governor weep with envy. Cutter's response was pure, beautiful insolence. Let me get this straight. You want to pay me a fortune to run away from a 7-foot-tall, ridiculously attractive warrior princess who is, by a significant margin, the only interesting thing To happen to me in a decade? The Vizier's placid composure remained flawless, but a tiny muscle in his left eye twitched as Cutter clapped him on his perfectly tailored shoulder. Gesture of casual familiarity that was clearly physically horrifying. To him, tell the big guy I appreciate the offer, but my dance card is full, and you can send him my bill for the armor repairs. This flight suit isn't cheap, you know, sentimental value. The message was clear, the human could not be bought. Therefore, he would have to be removed. In Savita's private medbay, they shared a moment of dangerous intimacy as she applied regenerative balm to his plasma burns, her warrior's hands surprisingly gentle. Your skin is so soft, she murmured, both clinical and intimate. A Drakkar infant has tougher hide. The physical disparity between them was stark. Her hand, even without armor, spanned his entire shoulder. Her thumb could probably dislocate it without real effort. The thought was not nearly as alarming as it should have been. The assassination attempts began. First, a beautifully wrapped package delivered to Cutter's quarters that he casually tossed out a window, where it detonated in a silent flash of plasma that incinerated a prized collection of genetically engineered sentient flora. Next, a squad of elite ghost guards with vibroblades in the lower markets, warriors whose forms blurred with personal stealth fields. Cutter survived on pure animal instinct, kicking over a stall of writhing, levitating sky eels as living airborne distractions, and shattering a pressurized gas canister to fill the alley with choking fog. He escaped, but not unscathed. The deep gash in his side refused to clot properly due to the blade's ultrasonic frequency. Slumped against a grimy wall, he slapped a field med cauterizer onto the wound, hissing through his teeth at the searing heat and agonizing smell of his own cooked flesh. Knowing he couldn't reach Savita through conventional means, he remembered her bitter childhood tale of a sealed plasma conduit beneath her chambers. A potential flaw in the fortress she'd once tried to use as an escape route. Bleeding and determined, he navigated the forgotten maze of humming power relays and dripping sanitation pipes, the air thick with the smell of ozone, decay, and lubricant. After what felt like an eternity of crawling and climbing, he founded a thick circular access panel covered in decades of dust. He emerged through a hidden maintenance panel in the floor of her pristine minimalist chambers, collapsing in a smear of blood and grime on her polished chrome floor, not the sight of Cutter. Hunted and wounded shattered Savita's last vestiges of dynastic loyalty. This was not the act of a pragmatic emperor protecting his lineage. This was a tyrant willing to murder in his daughters' name simply because a man could not be controlled. It was an insult to her, to the duel, to the very concept of honor she had been raised to embody. When royal guards burst in with orders to detain the human, a euphemism for quiet execution, she made her choice. With a flick of her wrist, her personal plasma glaive ignited with a hungry hiss. The guards hesitated, caught between loyalty to the emperor and their battlefield history with the princess general. They knew that look in her eyes, the one she got right before breaking an enemy army in half. She moved through them not as a princess, but as the general. She was a whirlwind of brutal, non-lethal force. The flat of her blade against a helmet, a pummel strike to a chest plate, a disarming maneuver that sent a pulse rifle clattering to the floor. In seconds, her own elite guards lay groaning, disabled but alive. The line had been crossed. There was no going back. Together they fought. Through palace corridors, alarms blaring as they carved a path to the royal hangar. Their banter, once a tool of flirtation and antagonism, became a seamless tactical shorthand. Shields are down to 40%. I'm going to need you to pull an old yeller on that lead fighter's engine. Cutter yelled over screaming engines as he rewired power from inertial dampeners to shield emitters. Savita, who had forced him to explain the archaic and frankly barbaric Earth film one sleepless night, gritted her teeth. Cripple, don't kill. A merciful fate, she muttered, firing a single shot that tore through an interceptor's port engine. They were boxed in, herded by disciplined formations of interceptors, cutting off every escape vector. But Savita wasn't retreating. "Running makes us prey," she snarled, making the skiff so hard Cutter felt his organs shift. "We are seizing the stage." She aimed not for the open sky, but for the heart of the spire, for the Emperor's throne room itself. They crashed through the armored viewport, in a shower of transparent armor glass, skidding to a halt before the throne as the court scattered in terror. Duke Burroughs, now the Emperor's champion, stood between them and Theon, his already massive frame augmented with gleaming cybernetics, a crackling power maul held in his grip. They engaged him as a perfect teamed Sevita, providing direct force, while Cutter darted around the periphery, shouting nonsensical Earth combat terms that somehow translated perfectly into tactical imperatives. "Okay, now use the Rock'em Sock'em Robot's uppercut," Cutter shouted. Savita, parsing pure intent from utter nonsense, fainted low, then brought her glaive up in a brutal rising arc. "To the T pose of dominance," he yelled, planting his feet wide. Again, understanding the tactical intent, she held her glaive in a wide defensive stance, forcing Burroughs to widen his own to counterdot. It was just the opening Cutter needed. He lunged forward, slapping his trio of kinetic door knockers onto the cybernetic joints of Burroughs' knees and elbows. Fire in the hole. The charges detonated with sharp, focused kinetic pulses, locking and buckling the giant's cybernetic limbs. With the champion defeated, Savita turned to face her father. The entire stunned court and the live galactic broadcast bore witness as she unclasped the ceremonial crest of the Vakrish dynasty from her shoulder and threw it at his feet. It clattered on marble with a sound more damning than any explosion. "I renounce my title. I renounce my name," she declared, her voice ringing with absolute unwavering conviction. Then she grabbed Cutter by his ruined flight suit and pulled him into a fierce, defiant kiss. "We yield to no one," she proclaimed, her voice carrying across the galaxy. In the ensuing chaos, they escaped through an old dignitary transport chute, a vertical shaft leading directly to the cargo base, where Cutter had hidden his shipper. Battlefield knowledge and his covert planning combining in a moment of perfect chaotic energy. Months later, aboard the now heavily upgraded, questionable asset, their relationship had evolved into something neither had anticipated, a partnership of equals forged in the crucible of shared danger and mutual respect. The cargo hold had become their training room, their dining room, their home. They sparred with blunted practice staffs, movements now a fluid, intimate dance of sweat, muscle, and laughter. When Cutter finally landed a clean, soft tap on her jaw after hundreds of spars, Savita's eyes widened in genuine surprise before she tackled him, sending them both crashing to the deck in a tangle of limbs. "I let you win," she murmured before kissing him, the faint metallic tang of blood on her lips tasting like victory. They had become legends, in the outer rim known simply as the Draw, a singular noun for a two-person force of nature. They took on impossible jobs, not for credits, but for the challenge, toppling crime syndicates, rescuing hostages from corporate black sites, and once, on a drunken dare from Cutter, stealing the ceremonial toupee of a pompous Chulaxian ambassador. On the bridge, Savita watched Cutter pilot them through a dense asteroid field. He wasn't just flying, he was dancing, weaving through tumbling rocks with an artist's flair, his face alight with the pure joy of improvisation. The rigid, perfect lines of Imperial fleet formations were a lifetime away. This was chaos, and she found it beautiful. If my academy instructors could see this, she mused, her voice a low, amused rumble, they would have me executed for heresy. Then they would have you executed for fun. Hey, heresy is just what people call a good idea they didn't have first. Cutter shot back, banking the ship so hard the inertial dampeners groaned in protest. His eyes were full of something she'd never seen under the twin suns of her homeworld. Not awe or fear, but trust, absolute and unconditional. She saw the scar above her eye not as an invoice for a life of conquest, but as the final bill for a life she was glad to have left behind. Looking into the star-strewn expanse, there was no longer territories to be conquered, but a canvas of possibilities. Savita spoke softly. The title is retired. Just Savita now. She traced the new scar along Cutter's jawline, a memento from their last adventure. And you're the pilot. You pick the stars. I'll handle anyone who gets in our way. Their fingers interlaced the calloused warrior hands of a Drakkar and the clever, nimble hands of a human. They were a perfect contradiction, a living paradox, strength tempered by ingenuity, discipline guided by chaos. Two halves of a legend that would be told for centuries. In the quiet hum of the star drive, surrounded by the infinite freedom they had fought for and won, they yielded to no one. For they had everything they could ever need right where they were, together, undefeated.